Hello to all of you, friends. Our discovery today will be towards the Babylonian Empire, one of the most mysterious civilizations. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and click the like button before starting this discovery. Enjoy the show. The history of the Babylonian Empire. When and where was the most mysterious civilization in history founded? History of the Babylonian Empire. The Babylonian Empire is a state established in Mesopotamia in ancient times. Although there is not much information about its beginning, it is most likely thought that it was founded on a Sumerian foundation. Therefore, the name of Babylon means Gate of God in Sumerian. In later texts, the name of the city was called the Gate of the Gods. Sargon, the king of Akkad, burned down the city and destroyed it. The Sumerian kings ruled Babylon through governors. In 1894 BC, Amurlu-Sumuabum proclaimed himself the king of Babylon. In the third year of his reign, he captured the city of Kish. Although Larsa-Sumual defeated the city of Kish in 1885 BC, he could not prevent the expansionism of Babylon and took the city completely in 1883. In the same year, Larsa went on the offensive. For this reason, the king of Larsa took back the city of Kazulu in 1874 BC. Larsa had prevented Babylon's desire to spread southward. Sumual again built fortified positions and castles and opened canals. Dynasties seen before the Old Babylonian period, Isin. While the kings of Larsa were constantly in conflict with each other, the members of the dynasty started by Sumuabum in Babylon are known for the medium-sized success that glorifies the success chart of the city of Babylon until the Hammurabi period. Hammurabi period. Hammurabi, the sixth king of the Babylonian dynasty, became the capital of the country of the same name in the period 1792 to 1750 BC. With the accession of Hammurabi to the throne, he seems to have taken small urban centers around Babylon, Winter, Kazalu, Merid, but in reality, the country did not go beyond its old border. Although Hammurabi devoted a large part of his time to internal affairs during his long reign, 31. In the year of his reign, he overthrew the king of Larsa-Rimzin and declared himself the king of Sumer and Akkad. 2 years later, the Mari king Zimrilim was defeated. The capture of Eshnunna was only the 38th of his reign. It took place in the year. Thus, its borders expanded to the north as far as Nineveh. Hammurabi, in the preface to the Laws of Hammurabi that he created, writes about how the great Sumerian gods Anu and Enlil and the Babylonian god Marduk gave him a great superiority and tasked him with establishing justice in the country, asking the rich to prevent the poor from crushing the strong, the weak, while Hammurabi lists the following among the victories he achieved and the states he made subordinate to him: Nippur, Tusidu, Yor, Sippar, Larsa, Uruk, Isin, Borsippa, Dilbat, Lagash, Gersu, Kish and Adab, Mari, Ashnunna and Nineveh in the Middle Euphrates region. Elam and Assyria are not included in this list. Although he faced difficulties in the northeast towards the last years of his reign, he led the country to 3. After the period of the kings of Uar, he was able to gather under a union for the first time. The Hammurabi period showed an attitude towards keeping the heritage of Sumerism alive rather than being a spectator of the Sargon period. Many Sumerian documents were recovered during excavations in Kish, Sippar and Isin, which are the centers of Sumerian writing art. The fact that many texts were written in this language during the periods when Sumerian was not spoken was due to the structure of Sumerian that was suitable for writing religious texts, rather than an effort to keep the old one alive. Regardless of the importance and use of Sumerian in the ancient Babylonian period, many literary works were written in Babylonian during the reign of Hammurabi and the kings who followed him. Many important epics and hymns written in Sumerian were also translated into Babylonian. The most important work of Hammurabi, the greatest king of the ancient Babylonian period, is his eponymous laws. The laws of Hammurabi are written on this obelisk, which is made of a black stone 2 meters 25 inches high. The text of the law is written in 49 writing columns. At the top of the obelisk, Hammurabi stands respectfully in front of the sun god Shamash. The text of the law, which is written in Akkad, contains 282 articles. Items that shed light on social relations, various issues related to agriculture, debt, field and land rental, issues related to business and trade, family and inheritance, various professional groups, adultery, theft, disobedience, and similar items are listed consecutively. This important work is currently on display at the Louvre Museum in Paris. The Hammurabi period is a turning point in the history of Mesopotamia. During the periods of the succeeding king Samswiluna 1749 to 1712 BC, Abisu 1711 to 1684 BC, Amidatana 1683 to 1647 BC, Amazaduga 1646 to 1626 BC, and the last king Samsudatana 1625 to 1595 BC, no radical changes are seen. Towards the last days of Samsudatana, a part of the southern part of Babylon seems to have been taken by the sea tribes, but the Hittite king Murshali I reached south to the banks of the Euphrates, plundered Babylon, and moved its gods to Anatolia. With this event, it is seen that Mesopotamian history has entered a dark period again, and written sources have suddenly been cut off. The only known fact is that Samsudatana and the first Babylonian dynasty have been erased from history. There is a decennial gap between the Samsudatanas last year, 1595, and a Kazakh king whose history is known, but whose name is unknown. At this time, the Kassites, who gradually captured Babylon and were eager to get used to its culture with the Babylonian tradition, created a new capital in Dur-Kuragalza near Baghdad, but they constantly considered the city of Babylon as the capital of the country. During the 4 centuries they ruled, they managed to take back some parts of Babylon that had been lost to the sea tribes. However, it was the Elamite and Assyrian armies that really engaged themselves. For this reason, it can never be said that they were able to extend their borders to the fertile lands of southern Iraq. After 33 dynasties that ruled the Babylonian lands for a period of 350 years, the golden age of the Babylonians once again took place during the New Babylonian period. After the Assyrian kings Tiglath-Pileser, who reigned in Babylon for 1 year under the name Pulu, and the 5th Salmanaser, who held Babylon for 4 years under the name Alyaleu, Babylon remained under Assyrian control during the periods of Sargon, Sanherib, Esarhaddon, and Ashurbanipal respectively. Nabopolassar resumed Babylonian rule in the last periods of the Assyrians. During the struggle for their independence, Nabopolassar had not found time to fix Babylon, which had been the permanent capital of the south since the Hammurabi dynasty. Although his conflicts with Assyria and Egypt gave Babylon its former dignity, the reconquest of Babylon was left to his son Nebuchadnezzar II, who succeeded him. Due to the friction with Egypt, the king had the opportunity to correct the country only after the Palestine and Phoenician expeditions. Nebuchadnezzar, who took action to make Babylon the most magnificent and glorious city in the world, rebuilt the city with its double-protected walls, temples, palaces, and hanging gardens. In a sense, he built the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, one of the 7 wonders of the world, for his wife Semiramis, a princess who came from one of the hills in the east and was homesick. The city walls, which were completely made of baked bricks, were decorated with lions, bulls, and dragons. The city's passageway, which was entered through 3 gates, was made with bricks. The construction of the city with this extremely valuable material led to the use of the city ruins of the Arabs, who were in shortage of stone, as January quarries for centuries, and the destruction of their foundations one by one. After a year or two of unsuccessful rule by his son Evil-Merodach, who took the throne when Nebuchadnezzar died, his brother-in-law Neriglissar took the throne. After the new king had ruled the country for 3 years, his son Marduk, who succeeded him upon his death, could only stay on the throne for a few months. For some unknown reason, the throne fell into the hands of a statesman named Nabonid. Although there were attempts at peace with Persia and the Medes in the early days of his reign, it soon became clear that he was not an ambitious warrior. From the inscriptions he left, it is understood that Nabonid was engaged in the repair of the Sumerian and Akkadian sacred sites. Nabonid's attempts to build a temple in Haran were not liked by some Babylonians. He left the throne to his son Belshazzar in the 6th year of his reign and led a dervish life in an oasis in the middle of the desert for 10 years. Finally, when he returned to Babylon, he was captured and deposed by the Persian king Cyrus. Although the Babylonian Empire, which played a very important role in the history of Mesopotamia, disappeared into history when Kairos captured Nabonid in Babylon, the use of cuneiform and the Babylonian language lasted for another period during the Persian emperors, Macedonian rulers, and the Seleucids. Culture and civilization in the Babylonian state. The wealth of Babylon was based on agriculture and trade, which were its 2 lifeblood. Unlike the Assyrians, they were not a warlike nation, so their prosperous economy was not dependent on external plunder. Their agriculture was based on a complex irrigation system created through canals. The opening or blocking of river beds played a major role in the rise and decline of cities from time to time. Urban life was also heavily dependent on the internal and external trade of Babylon. Although shopping was generally done by barter method, gold, silver, and copper also entered the field of use starting from the 3rd millennium. Starting from the 2nd millennium, Babylon became the commercial center of the East and the crossroads of roads extending from India, Iran, and the Mediterranean. In the following period, barley, wheat, sesame, dates, and wheating were the main export goods of Babylon. In short, the legal system in Babylon. The laws of Hammurabi were enacted throughout the empire in the 18th century BC. An obelisk with a copy of the law written on it was found in Susa in 1902. It was a law that regulated the daily life of the Babylonians throughout. While private land ownership was allowed, it could be bought and sold from the owner's hands if the necessary overlordship obligations, such as providing soldiers or forced labor to the army, were not fulfilled. Although marriages were arranged through the purchase of girls, women, for whom the law provided some guarantee of freedom, had powers that had not existed until then. All legal children would receive an equal share of the inheritance. Science in brief in Babylon. The Babylonians were very advanced in the fields of astronomy and mathematics. Just as they wrote down the conditions of the stars and planets in detail, they could detect lunar and solar eclipses in advance by observing their cyclic repeats. However, they used their observations for the purpose of informing about the unseen through astronomy, and this was a very important task for them. It was left to the later people, especially the Greeks, to use the observations of the Babylonians for more scientific purposes. Mathematics was also used in the same way in terms of its usefulness in calculating money, measuring place, and similar subjects. Nevertheless, they developed a system of numbers and signs by which the place value was recognized. Accordingly, the value of a sign depended on its position in proportion to the degree of its relationship to other signs. This system was also valid for fractions. Thus, they were able to get out of much more complex accounts compared to previous periods. In the field of geometry, they could calculate facial measurements and volumes, as well as know more advanced geometric relationships. Religion in Babylon in short. The religion of the Babylonians was not much different from the beliefs of the other peoples of Mesopotamia. The Samians followed Sumerian traditions, and both Babylonian and Assyrian myths were of Sumerian origin. Like the Assyrians, the Babylonians worshipped two great triple unities, Anu, heaven, Enlil, air, Enki, earth. The other trinity was related to the stars on the basis of a strong Semitic influence. Shamus, sun, Sin, moon, and Ishtar, Venus, while the underworld gods were of Sumerian origin. Marduk, who was originally the local god of Babylon, developed over time and became the greatest god, then became the main god of death and resurrection of Babylonian mythology. At the time when Babylon was at its strongest, a monotheistic trend towards unification was looming around Marduk. Marduk is sacred in the Babylonian translation of the poem called Creation, Enuma Elish. This poem was recited in front of large masses of people every year at the New Year's Day festival in Babylon. Since fatalism was also an important feature of the Babylonian religion, it naturally had a great role in foretelling the future, either through astronomy or by studying the internal organs of sacrificial animals. Therefore, the class of fortune-telling priests was born and glorified. There was also a complex system of medicines and treatments based largely on these magic practices. However, especially in the later periods, some attempts were made in line with a more scientific understanding of medicine. On the other hand, they were also very knowledgeable about healing with herbs and minerals. After the king in terms of authority in the country, the clergy would come. In short, literature in Babylon. Babylonian literature, consisting of historical or semi-historical inscriptions throughout, was written in cuneiform. Hymns, myths, etc., translated from Sumerian. These were collections that contained or contributed to stories of Sumerian origin, such as the Epic of Gilgamesh and the Epic of Creation, as well as Babylonian texts and prophecies, rituals, and large variations of which were transformed into a complete literature of demon-chasing and magic ceremonies. In short, art in Babylon. Babylonian architecture did not show a deep-rooted distinction from the rest of Mesopotamia, except for the Assyrians' use of stone. However, there was a certain passion for the monumental form, as can be seen in important structures such as palaces and ziggurats. The ziggurats, with their brick-laid temples on the hills, were like stepped pyramids of brickwork that gradually narrowed upwards. The Babylonians used glazed brickwork relief sculptures a lot, the most popular colors being blue and yellow. After excavations at various times, the German Robert Koldewey excavated the city of Babylon decently between 1899 and 1917. As a result of these excavations, Babylonian cuneiform texts, reliefs, sculptures, cylinder seals, ceramics, and various items were uncovered. Later excavations found the remains of the famous Ishtar Gate and the palace complex.